Warm welcome to you when you listen to this short video. I am presenting the material of a talk that I did for the Women Aglow group in The Hague recently online, so that first of all it is documented, and second it is also available to anybody who would like to hear it. Now the topic of this talk has to do with the challenge that if we are Christians and we follow the great commandment of Christ, how do we connect to the people around us in our personal networks in such a way that the life that we have with Christ and everything that's part of that is sort of shared with the others, so that they also can, if they want, get to know Jesus and come into a relationship with Him. This is the question: how does it work? What does this practically mean? And second, if we look in the Gospels, and we follow the little processes that happen between Jesus and the fisherman, for example, what steps are in this process that are logical and that we can learn of? Now, it says in the Bible that John the Baptist was going and preaching in the desert and made the way sort of for Christ to be presented to the Jewish nation. So in a sense, when the Lord was in the earth, He didn't have to start Himself because it was done for Him. And this is also for us, so that in many situations that we come into Christian ministry, the way has already been created. There is already a connection. For example, I remember I was once in Mozambique, and I got a word in my heart that I should do something in prison, but I had no contacts with people in prison. So through talking with some friends there, I met a few people that were regularly visiting the prison and meeting with inmates. So simply I went with them, and in their footsteps I came in there and did some medical work for the prisoners, shared in the courtyard of the prison. It was a wonderful time, but I would never have been able to connect to those inmates if the way was not already created by the simple effort of maybe years of other people that were there. So this is an important fact. Your Christian challenge you don't do on your own. Many have been there before you, and you do it together. Second, we read that two of the disciples of John the Baptist asked Jesus when John had said, "This is the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world," asked Jesus, "Where do you stay?" And Jesus said, "Come and see." So the words that in fact brought the first disciples were "come and see." So they went with Him, and they were seeing where He stayed, and they had sort of normal conversations and meeting with Him, making a relationship, simply. That was the first registered thing that Jesus did to make disciples. Later on, he because John the Baptist was killed, we know about that. So he withdrew himself to Kapernaum. Now Kapernaum is at the coast of the Sea of Galilee, and it's a fisher town in those days. So fishermen lived there with their families. So Jesus became like them. He started living with them. Simply, even in these days, there are areas in some cities where only people with a specific trade live. For example, in India, I was in an area, there were only people that were driving rickshaws. Or there was another part of the city, there were only beggars that lived there. So this was also in Kapernaum. The fishermen were living there. And there were some families that worked together, but also had a father had sons, and they had a boat. And there was another family that was a father with sons that had a boat. So on the shore you saw these boats, and you saw them going out and coming in as a regular thing. And Jesus decided to live in their midst. So making disciples, actually the initiative was for the Lord Jesus to just be there in their midst. So if you in a women and glow situation want to have the longing to make contacts, be part of the situation, the life setting where the people are that you're focusing on. That can be very different, but you have to think what you want. You have to settle down somewhere in a network that you feel God leads you to be a witness for Jesus. Then we see about this first calling moment. This is registered in different Gospels, but especially in Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, we see it in a very detailed way what happened. So Jesus was already having his ministry. He was teaching like a Jewish rabbi, and people were coming and listening. So he was just doing like it was done in the culture, right? Because rabbis did that. He was a teacher, so he was teaching people. So one day he was standing at the coast of the Sea of Galilee, teaching the people. And many came because they had seen the power of his words, but also that miracles happened when he laid his hand on the sick. All kinds of people came there to listen to him. So it was a bit crowded, and Jesus had a good idea, because he already probably knew Peter and all the other fishermen, because he lived in their midst. So he just walked on the boat of Peter, and it could very well be that Jesus had been there fishing with Peter. We don't know, because he was living with the fishermen. So he became like a fisherman. So he stepped on the boat and he asked Peter, "Can you please go with the boat a little bit in the sea so I can teach the people from your boat?" This is a natural question, and this is what Peter did. So Jesus continued his teaching ministry from the platform of the boat. Now, somehow Jesus knew that Peter had a disappointing day, because he had been fishing the whole night and not catch nothing. But Peter just had helped him with, "You can lend my boat for your teaching ministry, Master." So Jesus decided he should do something about it. And because he is God's son, he is the Lord not only of the world, but also on the whole creation. So he decided, "Peter, you go out in the sea and catch fish now, on my command. Do it now, and put your net in the sea." And Peter said, "Well, we've been doing that the whole night, but if you say so, sir, I will do it." And this is the miracle that happened, because the nets were full of fish. And that was the great moment in the life of Peter, that he realized that Jesus is not some normal person, a teacher, fisherman, but he really has, he is sent from God. He is holy. So that's why he said, depart from me because I'm a sinner. And this is the big moment that Peter opens his heart to receive Jesus, because he is a sinner and he knows Jesus helped him. So a wonderful relation starts. And only after that, this faith came into the heart of Peter. We hear Jesus say, come follow me, because I will make you fishers of men. And then the friends of Peter also came. And so in a few hours, Jesus had him following fishermen. Wow, what a story how it went. But so you see that in the details, it's a very natural process. And if you think about how can I love my fellow men, and I have friends, and I have women, and there is a women that glow, and I would like them to come, and I want them to know Jesus. The best way is to do like Jesus did, because Jesus was, first of all, in their midst. He was there. Second, he served. He served Peter to catch the fish, like Peter served him to use his boat. It was something that went two ways. So serving in a relationship, helping somebody with practical things, maybe. That is the key for the first contact. And you may wonder yourself right now when I'll speak, what networks actually do I live in? You think about your family network, your work colleague network, maybe you have a group of friends, maybe from all the times, that's your network. What is your network? What is the place where you are respected as somebody that belongs to that network, and that you can open up your heart and share? And you know, Jesus is not making religion with Peter. He is not trying to make Peter a Christian. He is not trying to convert Peter to a Jewish sect or so. Actually, what Jesus does is just giving himself. And this is what we have to do when we relate to people that have no knowledge of Christ, and we know that forgiveness of God is there and new life of God is there. Actually, we don't build a religion, but we build relations. So we sort of befriend people with Christ that we are already befriended with. An interesting other example of the gospel is Jesus that meets the woman in Samaria that is at the well, and he asks them, he starts a conversation with her. This was in itself peculiar because Jesus was a Jewish man and she was a woman from Samaria. That was a so discriminated group in Israel. But he just starts a relation. He just asks something from her. Can you please give me some water? You know, and sometimes we as Christians find it very difficult to relate to people that do not know God. But basically, it's what you have to do is to just be normal, be authentic, just behave like you would do to all other people. And this is what he does, and he starts this conversation. But because he is Jesus, he knows. You know, and I found that when you look at different ways that people behave as Christians in the midst of people that do not know God, you always share with people who you are. Not the lessons you've learned by knowledge, but what is your authentic yourself, who you are, your faith. And the level of faith and grace is different for all people. And that means that in Jesus' case, he was the Son of God. So it was for him completely normal, actually the basic line, to know what was in her thoughts and to know her history. This gift of knowledge was in Jesus full time. And that was what he told her. And that's the conversation went on. And then because he knew that, she started, like Peter did in the other story, she started recognizing and acknowledging him as a prophet. And so the story goes on. And then Jesus keeps the conversation on water, because that's what they're doing. They're drinking water. And so he speaks about the water of life. And then he starts speaking about worship, because she starts speaking about worship. So you see the natural flow in this conversation. There's no pressure from Christ. There's no pushing to make disciples, but he is just himself. But because he is who he is, he attracts people. And this is actually what happens when we are following Jesus. That because we are following Jesus, that when we share with people, they are attracted to Jesus in us. So like Jesus is the door for people, we became the door for people to meet Jesus. This is what happens in witnessing. For myself, when I was a young man, I needed to make a decision. What shall I do? Shall I continue with my medical studies? Yes or no? I asked God a sign, and he confirmed that sign in a very supernatural way. This is not a story, but I knew that I had a calling to become a doctor, and to be a doctor became also my mission to be there. I felt called to be there, and when I thought, where shall I work as a doctor, it was very logical for me to work in a very, not a rich area, but in an area where people were living that were not so rich. And it was not an easy place to work in the inner city. But I found that being there, this was the right place for me to land, so to speak, to settle down and become part of it. And it took me some years to become part of that community. This went through all phases. But I became the doctor of that town part. And every morning, 25 people were standing in my doorstep to come into my practice. And I started working for them. And in the midst of that dynamic, I found I cannot do anything in my own strength, but I started praying and praying and praying. And then this life of prayer came in. So I landed as man, as just flesh and blood in the midst of that community. And then I prayed, and then God landed in me with the Holy Spirit in the midst of this situation. And then God started doing things in that community because I was willing to be part of it. And I was also opening my heart for God to be part of me. And that's how it worked. So many things happened, and then the Lord said, bring them in your home. So more than 20 years, we had house meetings with patients. And that's a wonderful story how it went. And so the question is, how can that grow? I believe that if you want to grow in ministry in this sense, in this sort of disciple-making effort, because you are a disciple, you have to grow to be more a servant. So you do not grow in power or influence, but you grow more in service. The more you serve, the more you are a leader for others. And the last example is in the wedding in Kana. Jesus was there, his mother was there, his disciples were there, they were invited. So it was a natural being in a network, in an event actually, where Jesus was. And then suddenly he hears his mom say, they have no wine. Now, I learned something from that moment, because Jesus responds by saying, it's not my time now. That means that doing something in the will of God has absolutely to do with timing. You cannot just do it in your own decision or decision making, but you have to wait for the right moment. And that moment came maybe 20 minutes later, because he said to the servants, do whatever he says. And you know what happened? Then Jesus becomes like them, like surfing, and he says, okay, go and fill this big gallons with water. And because he is Christ, he is the Son of God, he then demonstrates his divinity by changing the water into wine. So again, we see the thing that we can serve and serve, but the timing is so important. In my personal experience, I've been working with patients now long time, many decades. But sometimes I knew them already for 10 years, and then after 10 years there was an occasion that God would say something in the midst of that relation, usually in a need situation. And we see that Jesus always connects to the need of somebody. He is always the helper in the situation. That's how he enters with who he is in that life. So he becomes a servant, and he becomes a fisherman, and all those things happen. And the last question that I want to say, if you think about that and you want to see your Women in Glow group grow in attendance, how does it work? And I believe that you can pray for more context. You can pray for more divine openings, like in the story of Jesus. Because that's the only way, because only God can do that, but you have to pray. And the more you pray, the more openings you have. And whatever you bring to somebody, it's always more than they have. You know, I mean, you have hope, they have hope less. You have faith, they have no faith. There is healing in you, and they are sick. And so there's always something in you that can be a solution for the one that you are connecting to. And then wherever you bring people individually to Christ, to meet him, bring them together. Because there is a dynamic in the group, in the collective of people knowing God and wanting to know Christ, that you can never give them in the one-to-one relationship. And so church is actually the ecclesia, the bringing together of people that really want to walk with Christ in whatever form, in a house or in a building or in a Women in Grow group on Saturday, in many ways, online, so now in Zoom meetings. So these are the things that I want to encourage you to pray for and to long for and to have faith for in this year. Thank you very much.